Okay, so here we go. Is this our third session for the live coding intensive? I think so. And what this next section of about an hour will be devoted to will be to MiniTidal, which is a version of the title cycles programming language that is available within the S3 platform that we've been developing here at McMaster. So this session then is a chance to use title cycles a little bit, but also a chance to start to see what is happening with the S3 platform. And then tomorrow morning, we have a workshop that comes back to the S3 platform and will be the first ever workshop that speaks about many of S3's secret features, aka the things that we've never had time to document properly. But I prefer to think of them as secret features. To follow along, you'll need the Chrome browser. I've got my copy of Chrome here. Chromium will work fine too, but I don't suggest any of the other browsers for this platform at this point in time. And if you have Chromium fired up, you can connect to the S3 platform by going to https, the S is important, intramuros.mcmaster.ca. I've noticed that with the current version of the platform, sometimes when you go there, instead of saying click to start, it says, like loading, and it stays loading for a long time. If that happens to you, just reload until after a few times you get the click to start. I wonder if maybe we should turn the lights down a little bit so that people can see the projection better. Try and see if you can keep it on this side of the room a little bit for me, but maybe if you turn the, let me think, if you take the switch on the far left all the way off, there we go. That's a bit better, right? Yeah. Is that okay, Luis? Is it good? Yeah, it's good. Thanks. So I'm going to click to start. And then I get these choices of these four modes. And we can talk more about the modes later on. But for now, because we're talking about MiniTidal, I'm just going to click on solo mode. And after a short pause, I'm going to get this interface that looks like this. Feel free to make it bigger or smaller using Command Shift plus or Control Shift plus, whatever works on your computer. And in the middle, I've got these areas where I can type text. And above them is a little menu box that lets me pick which language I'm working with. So I think I'm going to work over here in this window, and I'm going to leave it at MiniTidal as the language. So now I'm going to write my first MiniTidal program. I'm going to write the letter S and then a space and then some quotation marks. And inside the quotation marks, I'm going to put these two names. Do you want me to make it a bit bigger? I'll make everything a little bit bigger. And now when I click evaluate, after a short delay, I'm making music. And I'll take this moment to briefly emphasize, I think, a key feature of the S3 platform here. I didn't have to install anything to do what I just did. I just went to the website, brought up the programming interface, and I started. This is super, super important if we want to do this kind of stuff in environments like schools, community centers, other places where installing software could be prohibitive. But our main purpose today is to talk about the MiniTidal language. So we're currently hearing a pattern of samples. It's a bass drum sample and a clap sample. And those two samples, they're occupying the time of what we're going to call a cycle. So there's two things, a bass drum and a clap, two samples, and they're each getting half of the time of the cycle, like one half, second half, first half, second half, first half, second half, right? So if I put a third thing in here, I'm going to put this SN in there. And now I'm going to evaluate. And now what we're hearing is 3 different samples in the same time that we heard 2 before. And I'm going to put another clap in there. So now I've got 4 things inside the quotation marks. And now we're hearing 4 things in the same time as before. I'm going to go back to there just being 1 thing. So we have 1 thing, and it gets the entire time of the cycle. I could also do this instead. If I put a multiply 4 after the bass drum, I'm going to have 4 things in this pattern, again, and they're each going to get a quarter of the time. Okay, and I'm going to go back to one of my first examples here, the bass drum and the clap. So now we have 2 things, and they're each getting half of the time. And I'm going to put the 4 on the bass drum. And let's listen to what that sounds like. So now let's think about what that notation means. The cycle is being divided into 2, right? In one half, there is BD times 4. In the other half, there is the clap. Inside the first half, each one of those bass drum events is getting a quarter of that time. Or in other words, an eighth of the overall cycle.
Are they all single quotes?
They're double quotes.
They're double quotes?
They're double quotes, yeah. Occasionally you'll get this thing where you get missing notes sometimes, and just reloading will make it go away. That's a bug that needs to get tracked down in the software. Seems to have gotten worse recently. So, so far so good. I'm going to make a different pattern. I'm going to take the RP sample. Here's what it sounds like. Here's 4 of them per bar. And now I'm going to combine it with another pattern that is a pattern of pitch changes. Here's shifting it up slightly. Now, you'll notice that the 0 or the 3 or the 7 that I just typed, they're in quotation marks as well. So they're a pattern as well. So we could do something like this. So we have 4 RP samples that are being triggered per cycle, and 2 of them are getting the note 0, and 2 of them are getting the note 3. Often at this point it's fun to make chords. So if we put square brackets around this and a comma, we can put something else on the other side of the comma, and let's listen to that. Each of the things on either side of the comma are patterns. And one pattern has 2 things in it, so each part of it gets half of the bar. And the other pattern has 1 thing in it, so it gets the whole bar. If I put 3 things on that side of the comma, we start to get more interesting patterns. Everything we've done so far, don't hesitate to, I see everyone plugging in headphones, which is great, but don't hesitate to make sound out in the room too. It's nice to have some chaos. Everything we've done so far has been about taking a pattern that fits into one cycle, right? So as we add things, we're fitting more things into the same time. That starts to feel constrictive relatively quickly. So we're going to want to know, well, how do we make things that occupy longer stretches of time? And the short answer is by slowing patterns down, right? We take a pattern that is one cycle long and we slow it down by 2. It will now be as long as 2 cycles, right? So there's a couple of different ways of doing that. For now, let's do this way. If I go back to our starting pattern, there it is. And if I put everything in square brackets and then divide it by 2, it's going to take twice as long. That's one way to do it. That's useful in lots of situations. Because the situation of taking something that happens once, of making something happen once per cycle and then another thing happen the next cycle and another thing happen the next cycle, because that's such a common musical idea, there's a notation in Tidal that works something like that. So if we put the angle brackets around something, the cycle, the overall pattern will be slowed down by however many things there are. And so we'll get one thing per cycle. Like if I do this, we're going to hear one of those things per cycle. This is really slow music. So this might be, if we go back to the pitch thing we were doing a second ago, this might be useful for that. So I'm going to make a pattern of RPs, 4 RPs per measure, and I'm going to make a pattern of pitches that moves it around over 4 bars. We're starting to get the missing note thing again. Going to reload again. I think this is something that came in with a recent Chrome update. Here we go. So we can do math on these things. This is kind of fun. So let's talk a little bit first about what the types of these things are. So if I highlight this part right here that is the number 0357 inside quotes, that's a pattern. We don't technically know what that pattern means yet. It's just a pattern of numbers. It's the number 0, the number 3, the number 5, the number 7, and because of the angle brackets, it's stretched out over 4 cycles. But then because that gets applied to note here, that becomes a pattern of note transpositions, a pattern of pitches, basically. And then that pattern, because of this operator here, is combined with another pattern that, because of the S, is a pattern of sample triggers for the sample called RP. So that's kind of how our whole expression works there. So anyway, suffice it to say that everything in quotation marks is just a pattern. So there's a lot of tricks that we can do in that part of the thing. So we've already seen we can make chords by using square brackets and putting different patterns that are going to be part of the chord on different sides of the comma. So that we've added another note. And again, this place where we have the highlighted 12, that's just a place where we can put anything that is a pattern. So we could put another angle bracket pattern there. Maybe one with a different length to be fun. Like this. Sure, yeah. So the two dashes that I just put in there, those are symbols for a comment. So I put it in there so I could evaluate, but leave the code there for you to see. So in that last example, I think we saw something kind of interesting, right? We had, on the one hand, a pattern of pitches that goes 0, 3, 5, 7 over 4 cycles. On the other hand, a pattern of pitches that goes 12, 14, 15 over 3 cycles. It takes a few times around for these cycles to line up again. And so we get a kind of interesting, more, we get a kind of detailed pattern of interaction, an interference pattern between these two patterns that forms and maybe is interesting musically. We can, I think, continue to extend that idea by controlling other parameters of the music as well. So some of the other parameters we can control, I'm going to make a list over here. We have panning, where 0 is going to be all the way on the left, and 1 is going to be all the way on the right. And 0.5 is going to be in the middle. We have shape, which goes from 0 to 1, which is a kind of distortion, where 0.5 is going to be a little bit distorted. We have gain, which goes from 0 to 1, where 0 is going to be completely inaudible. 1 is going to be the default. It's going to be pretty present. And 0.9, 0.8, those are going to be things that are actually quite a bit quieter. It takes some experimenting, I think, to get a sense of how that works. Some other parameters we might play with. How about crush, which is a bit crusher? I should be demoing these things for you, I think. Okay, so I'm going to put the bass drum on. Here's our bass drum. Now I'm going to give it the 8-bit crush treatment. Doesn't sound that much different. What if we do 2? Okay, there we go. Apparently 8 bits is enough for this sample to sound natural, but 2 bits isn't. But see, this is pattern, so we could go back and forth between those two versions like this. So I'm going to put more so we hear it more often. Some of those missing notes again. We could combine that with a pan pattern. Let's put it to the left, the beginning of the cycle, and the right on the end of the cycle. Let's make it gradually get quieter over each 4 cycles. Let's go. So gain starts at 1, then 0.8, then 0.6, then 0.4, and then 0.2. I guess that's 5 cycles. Just going to reload. I think there's, whoops, that's not where I wanted to go. I think there's one last thing I want to show you before we just kind of play with it for a while. And that's that in addition to combining different types of patterns, if you like, that have different time scales and different numbers of objects in them to produce interesting interference patterns, in addition to that, which is a major thing we can explore with Tidal, we can also explore taking the patterns that we get from that and then transforming them in systematic ways. So a simple example of this might be something like this. Here's bass drum clap. Same tempo as we had before. This is the beginning of the cycle. So it's like first half, second half, first half, second half. And now I'm going to apply this to it, fast 2. And it's everything in that pattern is going to happen twice as fast as it happened before. Right? I could also slow it down that way. And there are lots of these types of transformations, and some of them get a little bit more abstract or higher level. So I'm a big fan of this one, Jux. And what Jux does is you give it another transformation, and it applies the transformation to the pattern, and it keeps both the original and the transformed one, and puts one of them in each speaker. So if I put fast 2 here, in one speaker we're going to hear the original pattern, the bass drum and clap, and in the other speaker we're going to hear that same pattern but twice as fast. Which, I mean, even with a brutally simple pattern like this bass drum and clap, like it's as simple a pattern as it gets, hearing the spatial interaction between those two versions of the pattern is like, it's pleasant, you know? Like I get enormous pleasure from this kind of like spatial juxtaposition of different versions of a pattern. And this is like with the simplest pattern of all. It gets so fun when these patterns have some inherent complexity. Let's give that a shape pattern as well. And let's do another higher level transformation. Let's say every 4 bars make everything twice as fast. Actually, I'm going to put one more item in the shape pattern just so that it doesn't line up so evenly with the other thing. You know, it's more fun. It's more fun when it's more distorted, isn't it? So I'm going to actually, I think, make the pattern something more like this. Actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take that whole thing, and I'm going to speed it up by 7. No. Speed it up by 7 and slow it down by 3. So now it's going to have a strange relationship to the bar, and we're going to hear the distortion changing all the time. Oh, it didn't like my... Put another... We can... Let's transpose it around, because it's getting a bit of a pitch. The distorted one has a pitch, so let's move it. Anyway, fun stuff. This is a great live coding moment because I had no idea I was going to be so industrial here in this session. Maybe it's, did anyone see the first episode of the new Black Mirror season on Netflix? It's got all this Nine Inch Nails music in it. It's great. Very industrial ending. Maybe that was what put it in my mind. Anyway, so I've shown a few starting points, I think, in MiniTidal. So maybe we'll turn off the live streaming now, and we'll just play with it for 20 minutes or something like that, and ask each other questions and help each other and see how far we can take it.